So, Glassway is one of the harder GMs on rotation, and the boss room can be quite a nightmare to deal with. Today, I'm going to show you a method to make it a bit easier to clear. It can be quite daunting if you don't go into the final room with a plan, so this video should give you a hand when it comes to it. For loadout suggestions, the first thing I would recommend is for you to run something that you're comfortable with. There are obviously some things that will make a weapon stronger for this GM, and I will give you some suggestions, but I'm not your mum. You should make the decision for yourself on whether or not you take those in. Void weapons do great here due to the Void Burn. Anything intrinsic or capable of dealing with barrier and overload champions, anything that has high amounts of crowd control, and finally weapons that can deal substantial damage without critical hits due to having wyverns in the final room. Glassway doesn't have many shields, but I would still say it is worth having your team bring something that can pop all of them. Arc Harpies show up in the boss room, and Solar Heavy Shanks kind of just pop up throughout most of the early GM, but none come up in the boss room. You will also have Elixir, Barrier, and Overload champions to deal with throughout the GM, but these will change to Vex for the final room. My go-to primary for this GM is Le Monarch. I love this bow in general, but it works incredibly well here, being intrinsically anti-overload and void. It also helps that exotic primaries deal more damage to red bar enemies, making it very easy to deal with adds from afar. An alternative I would recommend is Under Your Skin, as it's also a void bow and bows are anti-barrier this season. It can get some really good rolls, but the one I like to use is Archer's Tempo and Explosive Head. Another really good energy slot choice for this GM is Divinity, as it makes dealing with champions and wyverns incredibly easy if your team is coordinated due to the huge crit bubble, intrinsic overload, and small debuff of 15%. For my kinetic slot, I chose to have something to keep large groups of adds in check. For this I went with Pardonar Dust with Blinding Grenades, Auto-Loading, and Vorpal. You could substitute this with Witherhoard, as we can clear us here this season, making an already strong gun even stronger. You could also bring Arbalest if you don't fancy dealing with shields. Just note that crits can be harder to find in the boss room. For the heavy slot, my go-to option would be a Void Rocket Launcher, but any rocket launcher you like would do just fine. Red Herring is an adaptive Void Rocket Launcher from Witch Queen with a great perk pool and it's craftable. And an honourable mention would be Bad Omens if you have a good one lying around. If you have somebody running Divinity on your team, then a Void Linear or Linear of your choice is also a good option. For mods, exotics, and miscellaneous things to run across your team, I would recommend having someone run Aeons and finishing as many champions as possible to allow you to spam your heavy if you fancy playing that way. Lucent Finisher is also on this season as well, which is a no-brainer for anyone on your team to run. I like to run one Concussive Dampener and one Sniper Resistance mod on my chest piece, but you could probably swap the Dampener out for Void Resistance if you have a Void Elemented chest piece, and it would work better. Going into the boss room, you will just have a few red bars and an overload champion in front of you. Deal with the overload, then move inside of the room on your left. This is going to be where you're going to live for the rest of this GM. You have 3 ways enemies can enter. The door you came in, a hallway down the middle, and a door on the top left. They will mostly be funneling down the middle corridor, but keep checking all 3 entrances as champs, red bars, and wyverns can come through them and catch you from behind. The whole strategy to make this easier for yourself is to only deal small amounts of damage to the boss or bosses at a time. This is because the enemy spawns are bound to the boss's health, and dropping it below certain thresholds will spawn more enemies. You will be effectively just running a loop of whittling down the boss's HP until a new wave of enemies shows up. You will know when more enemies are coming, as a message just above your super bar will pop up saying, Vex Reinforcements inbound. The first wave of enemies is going to consist of both bosses and 2 overload champions. The champions like to come from the right door on this wave, but can also come from down the middle or the left. You want to prioritise dealing with the champions first while avoiding getting too close to the doorways, as the bigger boss will be launching void cannon shots at those doors. The little boss will come down the middle corridor and make its way into the room with you. Do your best to stick to the opposite side of the room it goes to, and burst down the overloads as fast as possible. It's a good idea to try to finish the overloads when they enter, as it will drop you heavy bricks inside the room if you're running Lucent Finisher, allowing you easy access to spare heavy bricks without having to put yourself at risk. Once you have dealt with the 2 overloads, you can start to whittle down the little boss's HP until it is just above 2/3. At this point, it will leave and wave 2 will start. The second wave will spawn 2 more overload champions and a few more red bars. This wave is a little easier to deal with, as you have a lot more space to work with now that the smaller boss is gone. Deal with the overloads and the rest of the adds until only the big boss is left. Then deal damage to that one until it has 2/3 left to start wave 3. Wave 3 is a very easy wave to die on. As soon as the bigger boss leaves, the smaller boss will come back along with 2 wyverns and 2 barrier champions. You can try to burst down the one that spawns on the left portal by peeking it from the left, or you can just let them walk in on you, but I will recommend trying to get some damage off before they get to the room. The wyverns hit really hard and will do a massive slam attack that will most likely one-shot you if you stay in their line of sight for too long. Prioritize killing them as fast as possible, then start working on the barrier champions. They won't enter the room that you're hanging out in, they will kind of just spend time outside around the middle and the right entrance, so you can take your time with them and kill them from the doorways. Once they are dealt with, start tagging the boss down to start wave 4. Wave 4 will bring the same as the last. 2 wyverns and 2 barrier champions. Take this wave on the same as the last one. It's also worth noting that wyverns are finishable if you get yourself in a pinch. Wave 5 will just be 2 overloads with some adds followed by the big boss. Deal with the overloads and try to get some finishes in to keep your heavy up. Once you have dealt with the overloads and the adds, start tickling down the boss. When the big boss hits half health, the 6th wave will start. It's just another 2 overloads and some adds. Once you have cleared it, rinse and repeat until the big boss is at 1 bar of health left. Wave 7 is the final wave. It can get quite hectic. You will have both bosses and 2 wyverns along with 2 barrier champions. Focus down the wyverns first and then finish off the little boss. This will spawn 2 more wyverns and 2 more barrier champions. Once again, clear up the wyverns as soon as possible. After that, all you have left to do is to kill the 4 remaining barrier champions and then the final boss. I find this GM so much easier having a plan going into it, and I really hope this guide helped. I stream most evenings, and I start around 8 UK time over on Twitch in the evening, and I'll be here running Glassway for a lot of this week, so if you need a hand, pop in, and if I've got a slot, I'll happily lend you a hand. Thanks for watching, and I hope you have a great day.